of life. Okay, before I tell you the secret, I want you to know the sky is not going to open up and the light come in here. It's not such a big secret. Like a backbone, you can twist and flex and change the shape. So I will show you two shapes and ask you which shape is more stable, 1 or 2. And you can't answer the question because I leave out one fact. Okay, the yellow pipe are both negatively charged. 1, or this is 2. 1, which one? This one. Yeah, because the two negative charges, they repel each other. Okay, now the secret. There's a protein, and then there's something called a signal. The signal can be a chemical, like a drug, a hormone, a growth factor. Or a signal can be a vibrational wave. But I'll use the chemical one because you can see it. Now here's what this is negative, the yellow, okay? And this is positive charge. But more positive charge than this has negative charge. Okay? This comes like this. And when it gets near the protein, it will bind. What's the charge at this end? Yeah, and the charge here? Is this more stable or is this one more stable? What did it do? It changed shape? It moves. Movement is where life comes from. When proteins change shape, they create behavior. Now, if the signal comes off, what does the protein do? It moves back. So that you are made out of proteins. That gives you the structure, but the movement is the protein plus the signal. So if you are dead and you still have your protein body, what's missing? The signal. Okay, so in this protein gears, and each protein is like a lock, and the signal is like a key. And there's a different signal for different protein. When the signal moves and binds to the protein, behavior. When the signal is not there, no behavior. If you want the behavior to go again, what do you have to do? Another signal. Another signal, and then protein goes again. Your body will move when the signals come, will stop when the signals are not there. So these are, again, the three different proteins, and these are actual molecular studies of how the protein moves. With signal 1, with signal 2, signal 3. And this is the behavior of protein. Now, in medicine, the signals are always indicated to be physical chemical because medicine is Newtonian. So all signals must be matter. Recently, physicists are looking at protein movement. And this is a paper in the journal Nature. And these two authors, Popfristic and Goodman, were studying how proteins move, the behavior. And they wanted to predict the movement. So like Newton, when he predicted the movement of the planets, they used Newtonian physics, a Newtonian equation, to predict the movement. It didn't work. And this is a review of this paper. And this chemist, physical chemist, writes, the most pressing question raised by Popfristic and Goodman, when will chemistry textbooks begin to serve as aids rather than barriers to this enriched quantum mechanical perspective on how molecular turnstiles move? because when they used quantum physics to study the movement, they were able to accurately predict the movement. So the most important conclusion is the subtitle of the article. What are the forces that control the twisting and folding of molecules into complex shapes? Don't look for the answers in your organic chemistry textbook. The reason why this is important is that medicine is based on organic chemistry, and the answers to how life works are not in the book. In a more recent one, this concept of materialism, matter only, false. Okay, this is a more recent paper just a few months ago, and how they control biological functions. They were studying protein movement, and what they showed was this. It acted as a quantum mechanical machine. And if they shine a light on the protein, when the waves were in phase, the protein was active. And when they shine a light and the waves are out of phase, it shut off the protein. So it says, for a quantum mechanical object, one can arrange interference of several paths to create constructive interference that selects one state and destructive interference that blocks the other. Proteins respond to good vibes and bad vibes. So this is a picture of the light pulse that they shine on the protein to make it active or to shut it off. So our belief that we use today in medicine of chemical control is incorrect because the proteins respond to the vibration. So now you have enough information to know how life works. You are made out of protein. The signal, where does the signal come from? Field. Yeah. Right. And so the field is the signal. Medicine talks about molecules, but then physics talk about energy control. So the energy in your body that controls the protein is a vital force. So the new science brings back the old story of vital forces controlling life. So when a signal binds to a protein, what happens to the protein? It moves. It makes behavior. Okay? Now, if you are healthy, your behavior is good. But if you have a dis-ease, the behavior is not right. Question: what can cause disease? There's only two things. Either the protein is bad or the signal is bad. Now, look. People with bad proteins got them from birth defects, because if you were born with defective genes and the genes make the protein, then the protein is defective. But less than 5% of the population has birth defects. That means 95% of the people should have a healthy, happy existence. But if you were one of the healthy people and now you are sick, what would cause the problem? All right. There are only 3 ways to mess up the signal. 1, trauma. So if I fall off the stage and wrench my back, the signal is interfered with. Number 2, toxins. If the chemistry is not good inside the body, the signal cannot be passed through bad chemicals. Both of these interfere with the propagation of the signal. But the third one is thought, the mind. There is nothing wrong with the body. It's just sending the wrong signal at the wrong time. So if you change your thought and your mind, you can change the biology. And the mind is the primary cause of illness on our planet today. Okay, so now, I will now go and say the brain is is what controls the signals. So I will now show you how the brain of the cell works, because it's the same mechanism that the human brain uses to control our own life. So where is the brain? What controls the cell? Brain. Where is the brain? They know.
Yeah, they read your book.
The membrane. Now you might say, I said before that you and the cell are the same. So you might say, am I saying that your skin is the brain? Yes.
Ja.
Yeah.
Ja.
Yeah. In embryology, the sperm and the egg come together to make a zygote. And then the cell divides and makes a ball of cells called the blastula. And then the cells form three concentric layers. The outer layer is called ectoderm, the middle one is called mesoderm, and the inner one is endoderm. Each layer gives rise to specific tissues and organs. The ectoderm gives rise to two things. The outer layer, ectoderm, forms skin and the central nervous system. So like the cell, your skin is the brain. Well, I will show you now how it works. Inside the cell are the protein pathways. And the outside of the cell is the skin or the membrane. The signal comes from the environment and goes through the membrane to go to the gears. So the membrane controls if the signal comes in. Okay? The signal comes from the environment, the protein creates the behavior, and the membrane is a switch. Okay? This is like the other slide. Signal plus protein. Do they know what goes over here? Behavior. Now, I'm going to show the signal comes from the environment and hits the switch. Then the switch sends a signal into the cell to the protein to make behavior. So the switch controls the signal coming in. There are over 100,000 switches on the cell at any time, but all switches are about the same. It does two things. One, it reads the primary signal, and then the switch 2 sends a secondary signal into the protein. So there are two parts to the switch. In the skin are receptor proteins, and receptor means receiver. Okay. Do you have receptors?
Habt ihr
in your body? Name the big ones. Eyes.
The eyes,
No.
nose, ears, mouth.
Okay, what's the point? All of your receptors are built into the skin. And these receptors read the signals from the environment. So it's just the same as a cell. This is a simple, like eye or ear or nose. The receptor has an antenna, responds to the vibration signals from the environment. What happens when a signal binds to a protein? What happens to the protein? The protein moves. So there's two states to a protein. Before the signal and after the signals, two different shapes. When the signal is active, it connects this one to this protein to this protein. And this protein, the effector, makes an effect. And it sends a signal into the cell to control the proteins. So the primary signal is picked up by the receptor. Then the receptor connects to the processor protein. And then the processor connects to the effector protein. And that sends a secondary signal to the protein pathway. Okay, now I will show you a video of how it works. This is the receptor with an antenna. This is the processor. Look at the shape and look at the shape. They don't connect. Signal comes, changes the shape. This hooks to this one. This one sends the signal into the cell. When the signal goes away, the shape goes back and the switch is broken. This does not fit. But now the primary signal changes the shape, and then this changes shape and sends a signal in. And this signal controls the function, a specific function inside the cell. So this is how a switch works. Okay. In the new biology, they talk about this is the cell membrane, and the signals come from the environment, binds a receptor, and then the effector sends signals in to control proteins. And at the end, you get behavior. So signal causes behavior. These pathways, there's a new field of science, and it's called signal transduction. And there are thousands of these different pathways. Okay. The name of the protein in science talk is complicated. It's called a receptor effector integral membrane protein complex. But I will show you there was a name for this switch for over 1,000 years. And I'll use the definition, and then I'll show you the word. The function of the receptor is awareness of the environment. Like eyes, ears, nose, it gives you awareness of what's going on. The function of the effector is to send a physical signal into the cell. Or I'll call it a physical sensation. So the definition of the switch is awareness of the environment through a physical sensation. Now in the dictionary is the word perception. And the definition of perception, awareness of the elements of environment through physical sensation. What is the name of the switch that controls your biology? Perception. And why that's important is that it's you and how you see the world that controls the biology. So conclusion number one, perception controls behavior. And what causes behavior? Yes? Oh,
yeah,
and
the
physical part. The protein. So the signal, the switch, controls the protein, which is the behavior. Okay. Now, we did not talk about DNA. When you need a protein in the cell and it's not there, then you need the blueprint, which is the gene. So how does it work? I get very excited because I'm going to show you how a gene works. But before I do that, I want you to know that we have been given misinformation. When people say a gene turned on and a gene turned off, it sounds like the genes make decisions. Here is the simple truth. A gene is a blueprint. So if you go to an architect office and he's working on a blueprint, and you lean over his shoulder and you say, is your blueprint on or off? And he goes, that doesn't make any sense. A blueprint cannot be on or off. It's a blueprint. A gene cannot be on or off. It's a blueprint. The truth is, are you reading the blueprint or are you not reading the blueprint? And the gene does not make that decision. So this is how it works. In the nucleus of the cell are chromosomes. The chromosomes are units of heredity. And the chromosomes are made out of 50% DNA and 50% protein. What does the protein do? And the answer is, for 50 years, we did the experiments. We isolate the DNA and throw away the protein. And some people a few years ago said, 50% is a lot of protein to throw away. What is it doing? And the answer to this question will change civilization. And I'll tell you why, and the answer is because when you understand how the protein works, you understand that you control the genes do not control you. A chromosome is a DNA core with a protein sleeve. Pretend my arm, my bare arm, is DNA. And I write with a magic marker a genetic code for blue eyes. And I say, can you read the gene for blue eyes? I say, what does it look like inside the cell? Can you read the gene for blue eyes? If you want to read the gene, what do you have to do first? Take the sleeve off? What's the sleeve made out of? And what causes the protein to change shape? The signal. Okay, so this new science is called epigenetic control. Before, in school, we teach genetic control, which simply means control by genes. Epi means above, like epidermis. Okay, so epigenetic control says control above the genes. Now I will show a video how it works. Very simple. Okay, the chromosome is DNA core with protein sleeve. At the beginning of each gene is a protein called a regulatory protein. The signal binds to a specific protein. The protein sleeve comes off, and then the DNA is exposed. Then a device will come up and make a copy of the gene, and this is the blueprint used to make the protein, RNA. And the signal comes off, and the gene is covered up again. Okay, now watch with fast. Signal from the environment selects the specific gene, sleeve comes off, the RNA, you make a copy, DNA, RNA, and goes to make protein. And then the sleeve comes back on. Now this time, let's see what the DNA did. Come on, DNA, do something. Come on, do something. Do something. Nothing. The gene does no control. The gene is never on or off. The gene is read or not read. And what do you think controls the signal? Perception. Okay? Now, so this is the same kind of signal transduction. And so the receptors are the input from the environment. Then the signal travels through the proteins. It goes to the nucleus and affects the proteins of the chromosome. And then the copy of the gene is made, and that's the output. You are not the victim of your genes because you control your genes. One gene blueprint using epigenetic control can make 30,000 different proteins from one blueprint. So you can come with good genes, and then through epigenetic control create cancer, diabetes, and it has nothing to do with the genes, but epigenetic control. So you can come with good genes and make mutant products, or you can come with a mutant gene and become normal. I'll show you. This mouse is a mutant mouse, a goody mutant. Blonde, fat, and diabetic. This is a normal-looking mouse. It's a normal-looking mouse because it's a goody mutant. The difference, when this was in gestation, in fetal development, the mother was fed these additives, and these affected the epigenetic control and covered up the mutant. So you can have mutant genes, but with epigenetic control, you can act and become normal. One more example. Okay, this is a mutant mouse. called kinky tail. This is a mutant mouse, same one, normal tail. What's important is kinky tail is the same mutation in humans that causes spina bifida. And this gene can be covered up with epigenetic control. So you are not the victims of your genes because you can change any of your genes anytime. The following is a quote from the scientist who did this. Both nature and, I think it's written, so both nature and nurture are important and both are intertwined, but what's bigger is epigenetics in terms of bulk. Genomics might be the tip of the iceberg, but epigenetics is the base. Medicine has some information about this, but it doesn't have very much about the bigger thing called epigenetics. When this becomes known to the public, it returns responsibility for your health to you, and you are not a victim of your genes. And recently, it is becoming more public. The recent issue of Discover, DNA is not your identity. Yet every day, the media still tells you that genes control this and genes control that. And then people get nervous about what genes are in their family. And as Greg Braden said before, if you look for the disease, you can create the disease through epigenetics. Right now, it appears that about 95% of cancer is not because of mutant genes, but because of epigenetic control. And it can be passed from parent to child like genes. But the difference is you can change your epigenetics at any time. So the central dogma, DNA, RNA, protein, primacy of DNA, is not complete. Put in the protein for epigenetic control. But the protein is controlled by the signal, which comes from the environment. So it's not the primacy of DNA that's in the middle. It's the primacy of the environment. Number 2, perception, the switch, controls the activity of genes. If you change your perception, you change the reading of your genes. If someone tells you you're going to have a disease and you believe that, then you can create the disease. So there are 3 conclusions because I don't have enough time to talk about one, but I will list them. Okay, conclusion 1, perception, how you see life, the switch, controls behavior because that's protein. Perception controls which genes are being read and how they're being read. And the one I didn't have time for right now is the 3rd one. Perception can rewrite the genetic code. So perception controls life. No 2 people see the world in the same way. They have different perceptions. But let's do a perception test. Okay, this is the question. The first one is a simple question because it's important because perception controls your biology. So the perception test is a simple one. Is the surface area of A greater than, equal to, or less than the surface area of B? Which is greater? B, yeah. They're equal size squares. Not equal, but they're uniform. So I want to make a more difficult test. I will show you 2 surface areas that are not regular. You must, with your mind, see which is bigger. So it depends if you're in the front row or the back row, or you have glasses, or if you're well or not well, what you see. So it's a question. I'll use a map. Which has more surface area, Europe or South America? Calculate in your head the surface. The answer is South America. South America is 2 times larger than Europe. Twice as large. You could see that, right? The map is wrong. This is the Mercator map. It was made by Germans. Where did they put Germany? Deutschland is in the dead center. Isn't the equator the dead center? This map is wrong. You want to see the correct map? It's called the Peters projection map. Which is larger, South America or Europe? The point is that you learn perceptions. And sometimes your perceptions can be right, and sometimes your perceptions can be wrong. Since perception controls biology, and since they can be right or wrong, then it's more accurate to say that belief controls biology. What you believe creates your life, on the inside and on the outside. When I come back tomorrow, I will show you where you got your beliefs from, and I will explain why it's very difficult to change your beliefs even when you talk to yourself. It doesn't work. And that is the most important thing, because when Greg said, do you believe you have powers and you can't express them, I will give you the neurological reason why it is difficult. And then I will show you how easy it can be to change a belief. Yesterday, we were closing out, and the conclusion that we dealt with was that perception controls biology, because how we see life determines our behavior, controls our genes, and can even rewrite the genetic code. But since our perceptions are sometimes right and they're sometimes wrong, then it's better to call them belief, so that it is belief that controls biology. You're not a victim of your genetics, that you are responsible for what unfolds in your life. Well, we talked about single cells yesterday. Today, I'm going to talk about a community of cells. So when you look at yourself, you're not a single entity, but you are a community of 50 trillion cells. But it's important to understand the word community. Every cell is intelligent, but when they're in a community, they give up their personal intelligence and respond to the central voice. So that the community represents a thing, one thing called an organism. And in that community, that a cell must follow what the central voice is. And if the central voice says to die, the cells will die. So the central voice is the mind. And I will be talking about the nature of the two parts of the mind and why we have trouble sometimes controlling our life. So what I would talk about is the role of how this mind works. First, there are signals from the environment, the internal and external environment. The brain, the function of the brain is to perceive the signals and then interpret those signals and then send the information to the cells to control the behavior and the genetics. So the function of the brain is perception, and from that creates the mind. Now, we have heard of something called the placebo effect, right? The placebo effect is when you have a very positive thought that something can heal you, even if you don't know it, but it's a sugar pill, but you believe it's the real medicine, then you can heal yourself with that. So the pill didn't heal you, it was the thought that healed you. Statistics reveal that 1/3 of all medical healings, including surgery, are the result of the placebo effect. Now, the issue is that the placebo effect is when you have positive thinking. There was a question this morning, what about negative thinking? And this is what medicine does not tell you, is that there is negative thinking, and it's called the nocebo effect. And in the same power that positive thinking can heal you, negative thinking can kill you. They're both the same effect. One is more positive, one is more negative, but the effects are exactly the same on your health. One will heal you, and the other can make you sick. The point is that negative thinking can create all the effects of chemotherapy. Now think about this. If a doctor tells you you have a disease, or the doctor tells you you're going to die, and you believe the doctor because he's the professional, the belief will give you a disease and can cause you to die. So belief becomes an important part of medicine. Now, many of you have heard about the drug Prozac. Every year, billions of dollars are spent on buying Prozac. And here's a surprise, that the Prozac is no better than a sugar pill, so that it is a placebo drug. And yet the people who take it believe in the drug so much, it makes them better. So if you believe that something is good for you, it will be good. And if you believe that it's harmful for you, it will be bad. In the United States, in the South, there's a religious group called the Baptist Fundamentalists. And this one group works themselves up into a state of ecstasy, religious ecstasy. And they believe God protects them. And so they will work with snakes, poisonous snakes like rattlesnakes, and they will even get bitten by the snake and nothing happens to them. Now look at this though. Some of them will drink strychnine in toxic doses, and when they're in that state of belief, it does not affect them. So if you can drink toxic poison, then why do we worry so much about the toxins or the food and the air and all that? Because we have a belief that the toxins can kill us. And even on the cigarettes, on the package, it tells you this will kill you. But even though I know this, I will not drink strychnine. And why? Because my belief is not as strong as their belief. So if we were growing up and programmed with stronger beliefs, we would be more powerful than we are now. Belief is important about everything, including our health and our aging and the world that we live in. This is a picture of some beautiful women that dance in what is called the Palm Springs Follies. And I ask, what do you think is unusual about these women? They have arms, but they're in red gloves against the red, so it's hard to see. What is unusual? Their ages. To 75 years old. Aging is not in their belief because they have a passion to dance. And the passion keeps them young and alive and healthy. But most of us see other people grow old and expect that we must grow old like they do. And then a more important factor that Greg has talked about, belief becomes part of the field. So while you might want to believe you can stay young, the belief of everyone around you is more powerful and will get you to get old. So the question is, if we are so able to be healthy and young, why do we get sick? And one of the most important reasons is stress. I will now show you about how stress works using cells and then people. So I put cells in a petri dish and I split the group into two sets. In one set, I put nutrients in front of the cells. The other, I put toxins in front of the cell. I put them back in the incubator, and I come back later and take them out. Where do you think the cells are in each experiment? When you come back, when nutrients are in the cells, in the dish, the cells move toward the signals as positive growth signals. But when toxins are in the dish, the cells move away from the threatening negative signals. So when the cell sees something that gives growth, they move to the signal with their arms open to take it in. But if the cells see toxins, then what they do is they move away from the signal and close themselves down. Cells cannot be open and closed at the same time. Cells cannot move forwards and backwards at the same time. The conclusion, cells can be in growth or they can be in protection, but they can't be in both at the same time. Frage.
Does Bruce believe that the expectations of the scientists affect the movements of the cells towards the toxins or nutrients?
Yes. But if you do the experiments without expectation, then the results are independent of you as a scientist. It's a very good question. I'll tell you why. When research on drugs is carried out by the drug company, it will be 4 or 5 times more in their favor than when the same research is carried out by independent people. So it's thought the scientist is very important in the process. So cells cannot move in both directions at the same time. They cannot be in growth and protection. So in summary, cells move to positive signals when they're in growth. They're attracted to positive signals. And cells will move away from negative signals. They'll be repulsed, but they're in protection. But there are signals that are neither positive or negative. I call them elevator music. When you get in the elevator, you don't dance, but you don't get sick. But the same thing happens in humans. The mind will perceive the environment, and if it sees what it believes to be threatening, it will send a signal to the cells telling them that the environment is not supporting. And the system is called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. The hypothalamus is the part of the brain that interprets the perception. When the hypothalamus sees stress, it wants to tell the whole body something is going on. So it sends a signal to the pituitary gland, which is called the master gland. And that gland sends signals to 50 trillion cells. But if it's a threat, it will send the signals to the adrenal glands. And the common understanding of the adrenal glands is fight or flight. Then the adrenal glands release stress hormones to the body. And the first thing the stress hormones do, and I'll make a quote from a physiology textbook. The stress hormones cause the blood to preferentially go to the arms and legs. And why the preference for arms and legs? Right, that's so you can run or fight. But you missed something when I say it that way. If the blood is preferentially going to the arms and legs, where was the blood before it was going to the arms and legs? It was in the viscera. And what's the function of the viscera? Growth, health, maintenance. Okay, so then logic. If the blood leaves the viscera, what happens to your ability to grow and maintain yourself? Well, it goes down. And the reason is when you're in protection, you shut off growth. So like the single cell, the whole body is in growth or protection, but not both at the same time. Now, some people think of growth from a baby to an adult, but everybody needs to grow every day. Even if you're 100 years old, you need to grow every day. And the reason is that your cells are dying every day. Billions and billions of cells, like the lining of the gut, has to be replaced every 3 days. That's why chemotherapy is very toxic. Because chemotherapy kills dividing cells, whether they're cancer cells or normal cells. That's why people that are on chemotherapy have trouble with digestion, and their hair falls out and doesn't come back, and the skin doesn't grow well. So if your days are filled with stress, then you are putting lots of hormones in your body to direct you for fight or flight. And that is why you start to get sick when you're under stress, because you are not replacing the cells at the normal rate. Okay, now there's another important effect about stress. When the hormones go from the hypothalamus to the pituitary and then to the adrenal gland, it releases the stress hormones. As I said, the stress hormones cause the blood to go from the gut to the periphery because the hormones squeeze the blood vessels in the gut closed. And the function of the stress hormones is to take the energy of the body and get it all to run and fight. So the stress hormones will shut off the functions of things that will not be needed in fight or flight. One of the most important uses of energy in the body is the immune system. And now think of this, the logic. Let's say you have a bacterial infection and you have diarrhea, and a lion is chasing you. How much energy should you put in to fight the infection, and how much energy should you put in to run away from the lion? Forget the immune system, because if the lion eats you, then the bacteria are his problem. So the issue is this. Stress hormones shut off the immune system. And the significance is, it's important, is that every one of you right now is infected with almost all of the disease germs that humans have. Right now, if I take a blood sample, I will show you you all have viruses and bacteria and parasites. And you might say, well, if I'm infected, then why am I not sick? Because if your immune system is working properly, it will suppress these parasites and germs. But the moment you start to shut off the immune system, then these organisms begin to start growing again. So the idea that you catch a disease is not really true. You already have the disease. And the medical people call these germs and parasites opportunistic organisms. So if you are under stress and you shut off the immune system, then you give these organisms the opportunity to then make the disease. And yet, when we get some of these diseases, we go to the medical doctor and they give us drugs to kill the germs and the bacteria. Well, this is very helpful if the disease is going very quickly. That was not the problem in the first place. The problem was stress that shut off the immune system. So to get healing is, okay, treat the disease, but also treat the stress. Okay, so now we have two problems with stress. It shuts off growth and it shuts off the immune system. There's a third problem which I call it's adding more stress. It's adding more stress. A third problem. When you are in fight or flight, do you think you use conscious reasoning or reflex behavior? You use reflex behavior. So very important. Listen. The stress hormones, I said before, squeeze the blood vessels in the gut, causing the blood to go to the periphery. But when the stress hormones come into the body, they also go to the brain, and they squeeze the blood vessels in the front of the brain where consciousness is, to push more blood to the back for reflex behavior. That means when you're under stress, you are less intelligent. And for my example, I give you the people of the United States. And the reason is the government knows this. And ever since 9/11, they keep in the media, the newspaper, the television, more stress, and the result is very important. And the importance is this. Since 9/11, every year, the pharmaceutical companies have made 20% more profit every year. In 5 years, 100% more profit in selling drugs. So it's important to realize that stress affects you in many different levels, but all of them result in shutting down your life. So in our next picture, it's like the cells. People move toward positive growth attraction signals, and people move away from fear or threatening signals. When you move in this direction, you're in growth, and in the other direction, protection. And some things in our world are like elevator music, indifferent. It has now been demonstrated that love is the greatest growth signal in the world. For example, in Yugoslavia, where they have orphanages, the leader of Yugoslavia?
I think, don't you mean Romania?
Romania.
Yeah.
Oh, Romania.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead with it.
Also, Ceausescu was the leader.
Yeah. That the people could not afford to take care of their children, and they sent them to orphanages. They got food, clothing, the protection of living inside. They got everything they needed to live except love. And about 40% of those children became autistic. What is autism is the child is shutting itself off from the world. It's in protection, closing itself down. And all of the parameters of health and intelligence in these children were greatly suppressed. They got everything but love. Okay, now the issue is, when we are in this direction in protection, we shut off growth, and that's when illness starts. So when we're on this side of the scale, protection leads to disease, and growth leads to wellness. And I said, well, what causes this disease? And the answer is stress. Now, here's the problem that people do not realize. If I just remove the stress from my life, where am I on the scale? It's 0. If you want wellness, it's not just the absence of stress. You need the joy and the love to go to growth. So if you're in the middle place, you're not in real growth and real health. So stress alone is not the problem. It is what we need is more love and life and happiness. And all of this is based on perception of how you respond to the world. So now the most important question is, where do our perceptions come from? Number 1, genetics. We get instincts we are born with. You do not have to teach a child how to pull its hand out of a fire. It is also very complicated instincts. For example, when a baby is born, every baby can swim from the moment it's born. It can be born underwater and swim like a dolphin. And this brings up a question which I'll answer in a little bit. If we were all born with the instinct and the ability to swim, then why do we have to teach children how to swim? And it's related to the second source of perception. And that is the subconscious mind, where our learned habits and learned experiences are recorded. So I'll talk about the swimming now. Okay. When a baby is very young, the parents are afraid that the baby will drown. So every time the baby goes near the water, the parents, the baby's by the water, by the sink, by the toilet, by the brook, wherever the water is, the baby hears the parents get very excited. So the baby learns that water is dangerous. And it has a fear of water because the parents express the fear, so the baby is afraid of water. So when the baby is 5 years old, the parents buy him a bathing suit. And they want to put the baby into the water, and the baby grabs the parents like a cat with claws. Because what is in the baby's mind? That the baby you're going to drown the baby. So the learned behavior can override the instincts. The third source of perceptions is the conscious mind, which is different than subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is learned habits. The conscious mind is creative programming. We talk about genetics because you were born with that as nature. It's in your nature to pull your hand out of the fire. But the subconscious behavior is learned, so it's based on experience, and it's called nurture. And for 100 years, science says, which is more powerful, nurture or nature? And it's a useless argument, because what's more powerful? Consciousness. When you are conscious, you can rewrite the instincts. And when you become conscious, you can rewrite the experiences of your life. So that it is important to recognize that what we are not using enough of in our world today is consciousness. And I will describe in a little while how most of our lives, 95% or more of our life, is controlled by the habits of the subconscious mind. Now the question is, in development, what environment shapes fetal development. And the reason why the environment is important, as I showed you in tissue culture, the fate of the cell is controlled by the environment in which the cell lives. Whether it's just one cell or billions of the cells in a fetus, it's still the same response. So the question is, what environment is controlling the development of the fetus?